Okay, guys, we're back. We just covered the mm, we covered the topic, the abstract, and the introduction so far. Now I want to start to get into the body. The textbook example has methodology as the first section. So this person says, to test my hypothesis, my methodology included collecting sources at the university library, running searches for sources on the internet. My internet and library sources helped me prepare for the empirical part of my study, which was a visit to a well-known chain store. So in this section, they're describing how the research was conducted. He says, I began my observation in the infant and toddler section, then I moved to the young children and finished in the preteens. In each section, I spent half an hour taking careful field notes about the characteristics of the toys and how they were marked, noting A, the name of the toy, B, its stated or unstated purpose, and C, any visual features such as choice of colors, decals, images, other visuals that signal gender. So he kept a notebook and he wrote down all of those things. Um, and then in the left column, he described the features, the packaging, and the way they were displayed. Then in the right column, I returned to each section of the store for an hour to observe how children in the store interacted with the toys. In the right column, I recorded how they reacted similarly or differently to various types of toys. When possible, I also described situations in which adults, usually parents, seem to be encouraging or discouraging children from playing with specific kinds of toys. So if we're looking at the methodology here, he's got three paragraphs. This first paragraph, which started on the previous page, it talks about the left column of his observation notebook, the raw details that he put in there. The next paragraph talks about the right column of his two-column notebook. He wrote down reactions in the right column. This is a little bit more subjective. I'm sure he tried to be objective about it, but these are things that he can't just copy from the box or the packaging of the toy. So the left column, the right column, and then this third paragraph is talking about how the adults reacted. So you can see that there's actually three parts of his research here, and he describes all of them. I'm going to ask you guys to do the same thing. You'll conduct some field research, and we'll talk about what's appropriate. But the first section of your body should cover what exactly you did. I would also like to see a little bit of the results in this section. This example has them separated. Your example is not going to have them separated. So we can see that he has his results based on the first infant and toddler area. In the boys area, there were toys like construction trucks and equipment, fire trains, fire engines, trains, and race cars. They were painted with bold and bright colors. Human figures in this area were always male, construction workers, repairmen, firemen. Sports were a common theme with lots of toddler-sized equipment for baseball, golf, and soccer. In the girls area, and he goes on to describe these different experiences in the girls area. I think that the methods and the results go together very well, and I would like to see some of the objective data. A lot of the stuff that he has here could be facts or figures, it could be raw data that he found. He talked about the toddler section, then he goes on to the young children section. The boys area had this, the female section had this. He moves on to the preteen area. The boys area had this, the girls area had this. I am a little concerned that he is talking about gender stereotypes and he always starts with the boys section. I find that a little bit sexist. Um, the next one has to do with adult redirection because that was one of the major things that he was going to cover. So your section number one is going to include your methods and your findings. Okay, so you're just going to talk about what research you gathered and try to be as objective as possible. So let's go on to the second section. This section, he's calling discussion. I think that it would be an important place to have an analysis section. So you've provided the raw data, Now would be a good time to tell me why this data is important or what it means. So he says, the margin says this discussion analyzes the findings and explains what they mean. Let's see exactly how they do that. He says, overall, I found that the differences between toys marketed to boys and girls were very distinct, with very few exceptions. These gender distinctions were clear, even in infant and toddler toys areas, which I did not expect. My findings showed that gender stereotypes are reinforced early and consistently in the marketing of toys. As might have been predicted, the dolls and action figures for boys and girls were very different. And so he's going through what he found and what each of these things that he found, what they mean. So he's talking about the figures that were used, the kinds of representation. The dolls themselves reinforced the skinny, blonde, big-breasted, and most often white stereotype. Almost always with preteen dolls and even dolls for young children were outfitted with revealing clothing. The female characters for young children and preteens were mostly princesses and fashion dolls. Action figures that represented males were construction workers, soldiers, policemen. There were no chefs, no fathers, or fashion models in the boys section. So he's explaining what this data means. This is not the same as the raw data that he found. This is giving some importance to it and making some interpretations about it. After he talks about the figures, the kind of people that are represented, he moves on to color. So interestingly, color seemed to be an important way to distinguish one gender's toys from another. I think this is all pretty obvious, but he says pinks and purples were used to mark products for girls. For boys, there wasn't an exclusive color except for black. Red, blue, and green tended to be in the boys' area, but most girls would not have a problem with using a blue soccer ball. Black was the color that seemed exclusive. And he ties it to his research when he says this seemed in line with Campanini's conclusion that feminine toys were stereotyped more than masculine toys. He goes on to his third analysis point, that he thought that for young children they were neutral and they started to get more gendered as they grew older, but that's actually not true, and he explains it here. So your first section will be findings and method. Your next section will be an analysis of what all of that means. This section, this essay does not have the third section, but it's covered quite a bit in the conclusion. So your third section is going to be recommendations or alternatives. And he seems to cover that in the conclusion. We'll go over specifically what your conclusion needs. But I think for section 3, this is a good example where he starts to call people to action. He says, so what insights can we gain in how the differences in toys affect child's sense of gender? I don't think I resolved the nature versus nurture debate, but I'm convinced that nurture is a powerful force in determining how children figure out what culture expects of their gender. Towards the bottom, he says, however, gender is not destiny. There is somehow still room for individuality that breaks free of the stereotypes. As long as parents participate actively in raising their children, this sounds like a call to action. This is the person who wants to take the action, and this is what he wants them to do, participate actively. They can overcome gender expectations and the stereotypes of today's world. I do want to talk about the conclusion and the references, but we just covered a lot. So I'm going to take us back to the document we were looking at in the last video. Right here, we'd gone over the cover page, the abstract, and the introduction. For the body, your sections are going to be findings or evidence. This should be about 2 to 3 pages, and it should explain the major concepts from your research, your internet research, and your field research. Cover the methods and how the research was conducted, and introduce the objective data. That's section 1. Section 2 is analysis or consequences. This is going to be a little bit longer. This is your discussion of things. It's going to be about 3 to 4 pages, and it's going to explain the major implications of the evidence. Demonstrate why the evidence is positive or negative by giving a variety of reasons. So this is where you're going to start to draw conclusions. What does all this evidence mean? Explain clearly in different points what everything, what is the implication of each of these things. So this is your section 2. Finally, your third section is going to be recommendations or alternatives. This is a little bit shorter again, and it explains what steps should be taken to improve the issue. You should still include research, and you should include research about things that have been done, that are being done right now, or things that should be done in the future. And there are a lot of people writing about those things, so you should be able to find that. So take a look at this: findings, evidence, analysis or consequences, recommendations or alternatives. I think it's important to know where we're going before you even start thinking about your field research, because you need to understand what's going to be expected of you so that you can perform research that's actually going to be meaningful and helpful. The very last two things I want to talk about. In the research report, the conclusion is very brief. It just summarizes the importance. We're covering a lot of the work that a normal conclusion does in this section. So the conclusion is going to be pretty short. For the references page, we didn't go over their references page, but everything is going to be in APA. And what I usually do, let's say I see a parenthetical, let's say I see something that says King, comma C, 2020, students are amazing. Let's say I have a reference like this. When I am reading your document, I double click on the name on your references page and I hit Control F. Now that highlights every single time this word has been used in the essay. It's only been used one time. When I'm highlighting these, they need to be used somewhere in the body of your essay. If they're not used in the body of the essay, this reference should not be here. So that's what I mean by cross-check. I'm going to highlight these and see how many times it was used in the essay. If it's not used, then it doesn't belong on the references page. Okay, so I hope that helps you. We're going to talk about each of these sections. Your homework for today is going to be to respond to the student report. So I'm going to ask you to read it carefully. It's in chapter 12, and then I'll post a clear explanation of what exactly you have to do. When you're reading, please write down any questions that you have so that we can talk about them in class. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.